former U.S. attorney who gave Jeffrey Epstein that controversial sweetheart plea deal back in 2008 was on Capitol Hill tonight. Alex Acosta is his name. You may remember him also because he worked in the first Trump administration as the labor secretary for a while. He just finished up his closed-door testimony before the House Oversight Committee.
Señores, hay un nuevo patrón que no se detiene. Cada momento sale a la luz el pasado oscuro de Donald Trump. Y por suerte para los demócratas del Comité de Supervisión de la Cámara, este es el mejor momento para que no se rindan. Al frente tenemos al congresista demócrata Robert García, el cual les está ganando esta partida a los republicanos MAGA. Está consiguiendo citaciones claves para interrogar a testigos importantes. Lo que más querían evitar, tanto Trump como los republicanos MAGA, era que Alex Acosta diera su declaración. Se trata del ex secretario y ex fiscal de Florida. Pero bueno, los demócratas consiguieron tomarle la disposición. Y señores, lo que salió a la luz fue patético. Bueno, para poder ubicarnos, les comento que este señor Alex Acosta fue el fiscal federal para el Distrito Sur de Florida entre mediados del año 2007 y 2008, cuando recordemos que se firmó ese acuerdo blando con Jeffrey Epstein. Bueno, pues, no solo dejó de lado a Epstein, sino que también a sus co-conspiradores, y sin consultar a las víctimas. Bueno amigos, ese acuerdo salió a la luz más tarde y cuando se supo el papel de Acosta en todo esto, terminó renunciando como el secretario de Trabajo en la administración de Donald Trump, en su primer mandato. ¿Ustedes se acuerdan de aquella conferencia medio extraña cuando presentó su renuncia? Bueno, pues, si no se acuerdan, se las pongo. Pongan mucha atención.
I have no idea. You know what I know? You know what I know about Alex? He was a great student at Harvard. He's Hispanic, which I so admire.
Pues bueno, ese es el tipo cuya deposición ahora estamos viendo. Y lo que contó Alex Acosta fue para agarrarse la cabeza. Admitió que él fue responsable del acuerdo blando y dijo que asumía la responsabilidad y que además habría sido lo correcto. Pero aquí viene lo increíble, porque cuando le preguntaron si es que había leído las declaraciones de las más de 40 víctimas de Jeffrey Epstein que estaban en el expediente antes de cerrar ese trato, básicamente Acosta respondió que no. No leyó los testimonios. Y aún así dijo que era un buen acuerdo. Yo me pregunto, ¿no? ¿Cómo es que se puede llegar a tomar una decisión tan importante como esa sin revisar las pruebas? Pues bueno, mientras tanto, los fiscales de línea, los que trabajaban en el caso todos los días, habían preparado una acusación de más de 50 páginas con hechos concretos. Es más, pedían procesar a Jeffrey Epstein. Pero entonces apareció pues una especie de cúpula, ¿no? De los poderosos en West Palm Beach. Los ricos, los influyentes, las corporaciones, los cuales se metieron y bloquearon la acusación. Un auténtico encubrimiento. Lo más triste, señores, es que cuando todo esto se supo, Alex Acosta obtuvo un puesto muy cómodo en la primera administración de Trump. Y claro, Trump intentó protegerlo mientras él renunciaba. Y ya, hasta ahí esa es la película en el primer mandato. Ahora, mis señores, vamos a repasar lo que se supo en esa deposición del viernes que los demócratas lograron obtener. Antes, señores, hay que hacer un pequeño reconocimiento y es que la congresista demócrata Stansberry estuvo al pie del cañón, señores, y lo dejó muy claro. Algo aquí huele muy mal. En mi opinión, la está rompiendo. O sea, merece la atención porque está haciendo un trabajo clave. Veamos primero qué es lo que dijo.
There were at least 40 minors who gave sworn statements to the FBI as part of the investigation before a decision was made in this case that they had been raped, abused, and trafficked. Over 40 minors. And the line prosecutor in this case wrote an 82-page memo to the leadership in the U.S. Attorney's Office recommending a prosecution. And she was so convinced, based on the evidence and interviews that she had taken and reviewed, that she drafted a 53-page indictment in this case. And what Mr. Acosta just told us is that based on his assessment of the case with his team, that he did not see sufficient evidence to move forward with prosecuting the case, that there were weaknesses in the case. When asked if he made the decision as to whether or not to fully prosecute this case, he took responsibility for it. He said it was the decision of him and his team. But when asked if he had directly reviewed the evidence itself in this case, he said that he had not actually read the statements of the victims. So let me just say this. Something doesn't smell right.
Ahora bien, vamos con otro demócrata que también habló sobre la deposición y bueno, tenemos que escuchar su punto de vista.
Everyone seems to agree that there was this terrible miscarriage of justice in this case, except Alex Acosta. He thinks that his sweetheart deal was actually the best course of action and still seems to stand by it. And he was investigating Jeffrey Epstein, who was a close friend of Donald Trump's. And this came up during his vetting process to join the Trump administration. And so it seems like it's starting to make more sense every day to me why the Trump administration won't release the files. Is because Alex Acosta was involved in a sweetheart deal. And it seems like the Trump administration is going to continue this cover-up until Oversight Dems gets to the bottom of this, because we're the ones that have actually been pushing the right questions in this case.
Y aquí viene la explicación desde el escritorio del propio congresista Robert García. Atención.
It's very clear that Alex Acosta ran a deeply flawed investigation of the Epstein case. That's clear. He also would not admit that Mr. Epstein received a sweetheart deal, which has been widely reported and agreed upon since that deal was actually made by Mr. Acosta and his team. So he would not admit, and in fact stands by the decision to have given Mr. Epstein a sweetheart deal, which was only 18 months, and which during that time, he went on to abuse multiple women. In his questioning, he also agreed and stood by those decisions and would not claim any responsibility to the victims. And in fact said, and was admitted that he had no knowledge of what happened to those victims, even to this day, when asked directly if he actually knew that people were being abused, that women were abused during that time, he would not admit that he knew that information and actually refused to acknowledge.
Y aquí tenemos a la congresista Min con su lectura del tema.
Congressman Dave Min out of California, 47, and before coming to Congress, I was a law professor at UC Irvine. And I'll tell you, after the first hour of sitting with Alex Acosta, I found him to be completely non-credible as a witness. His answers were evasive, they obfuscated, and they were just not believable. Just to give you one example, we know that his chief federal prosecutor, in addition to bringing a long charging memo and a prosecution memo, had actually said that the computer evidence that was being withheld by the defense at that point in time, all these files, the surveillance videos, perhaps child pornography, they were not producing it. She had said that that was a smoking gun that would put this whole thing to bed. When I asked Alex Acosta about this, his response was that he didn't actually review the evidence on this case and would have no input on this, which is just impossible to believe given the high-profile nature of Jeffrey Epstein at the time, given the fact that Alex Acosta was having meetings with the attorneys for Jeffrey Epstein contemporaneous with all this. Completely non-credible. I doubt we'll get a lot of honesty out of him today, but what we're hoping to get is a roadmap to the types of evidence that we can demand from, as the Oversight Committee, from the Epstein estate, a roadmap to that. And of course, we're going to continue to get, I believe, a lack of remorse, a lot of obfuscation out of Alex Acosta. Very frustrating, but we are going to get answers.
Sin duda no podía faltar también la congresista Ansari, que también hizo una pausa durante esta deposición y luego explicó a CNN lo que estaba pasando. Bueno, esto es lo que ella contó.
Can you share what you've learned from Alex Acosta so far?
I just stepped out of the transcribed interview with Alex Acosta. We'll be heading back in. We've had several hours of questioning where primarily we are trying to, first of all, understand why Alex Acosta struck such a sweetheart deal for Jeffrey Epstein, why he helped Jeffrey Epstein evade the law. And I'm going to be quite honest with you. Thus far, Alex Acosta does not seem to be a credible witness to me. He is extremely evasive, very difficult to get straightforward answers out of him regarding what happened during this time, what he knew of the relationship between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, why he only focused on a single state prosecution, did not charge Jeffrey Epstein for federal.
Bueno amigos, a raíz de todo esto recordemos el episodio del 12 de julio del año 2019 porque Acosta salió a decir por qué es que renunciaba como secretario de trabajo de Trump. Y Trump en ese momento dijo que no era culpa suya. Es más, que le gustaba Acosta. Escuchen.
He made a deal that people were happy with, and then 12 years later, they're not happy with it. You'll have to figure all of that out. But the fact is, he has been a fantastic Secretary of Labor. And Alex called me this morning, and he wanted to see me. And I actually said, well, we have the press right out here, so perhaps you just want to say it to the press. But I just want to let you know, this was him, not me, because I'm with him. He's a tremendous talent. He's a Hispanic man. He went to Harvard, a great student. And in so many ways, I just hate what he's saying now because we're going to miss him. But please, Alex.
Thank you, Mr. President. Over the last weeks, I've seen a lot of coverage of the Department of Labor. And what I have not seen is the incredible job creation that we've seen in this economy. And as I look forward, I do not think it is right and fair for this administration's Labor Department to have Epstein as the focus rather than the incredible economy that we have today. And so I called the president this morning. I told him that I thought the right thing was to step aside. It would be selfish for me to stay in this position and continue talking about a case that's 12 years old rather than about the amazing economy we have right now. And so I submitted my resignation to the president effective 7 days from today, effective 1 week from today, earlier this.
Y otro recordatorio, señores, porque el 9 de julio del 2019, días antes de eso, Donald Trump dijo que le daba pena que Acosta se fuera. Es más, aseguró que Acosta no había hecho nada malo y prometió llegar al fondo del asunto de Jeffrey Epstein. Dijo que no era fan de Epstein, que no le gustaba. Pero bueno, ya sabemos más, ¿no? La relación entre Trump y Epstein es más complicada. Están saliendo los temas de los correos filtrados, las tarjetas de cumpleaños, las fotos, detalles que lo contradicen. Donald Trump, sin duda, ese pasado no lo va a dejar tranquilo, porque sigue saliendo todo esto. Miren esto otro.
What happened 12 or 15 years ago with respect to when he was a U.S. attorney, I think in Miami. Is it Miami?
Yes.
You know, if you go back and look at everybody else's decisions, whether it's a U.S. attorney or an assistant U.S. attorney or a judge, you go back 12 or 15 years ago or 20 years ago and look at their past decisions, I would think you'd probably find that they would wish they maybe did it a different way. I do hear that there were a lot of people involved in that decision, not just him. I can only say this from what I know, and what I do know is that he's been a great, really great Secretary of Labor. The rest of it we'll have to look at. We'll have to look at it very carefully. But you're talking about a long time ago. And again, it was a decision made, I think, not by him, but by a lot of people. So we're going to look at it very carefully. We'll be looking at that very carefully. Okay? Okay. Anybody else?
Jeffrey Epstein is a terrific guy.
Well, I knew him like everybody in Palm Beach knew him. I mean, people in Palm Beach knew him. He was a fixture in Palm Beach. I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan. I was not, a long time ago. I'd say maybe 15 years. I was not a fan of his. That I can tell you. I was not a fan of his. So I feel very badly, actually, for Secretary Acosta because I've known him as being somebody that works so hard and has done such a good job. I feel very badly about that whole situation. But we're going to be looking at that and looking at it very closely.
Pues eso es lo que hay, mis amigos. Un patrón imparable que nos revela conexiones cada día. Mentiras, protecciones de poderosos, un encubrimiento en toda regla. Pero bueno amigos, otro escándalo que también pasó de la misma magnitud el día de ayer es que un fiscal federal de Estados Unidos acaba de renunciar luego de que funcionarios de Trump lo hayan presionado para inventarse cargos contra la fiscal general de Nueva York, Letitia James. Amigos, estamos hablando de que estamos viendo en tiempo real al presidente de los Estados Unidos utilizando su Departamento de Justicia como si fuese un bufete de abogados privados, solo para vengarse de sus enemigos políticos, porque esto, señores, es una vendetta. El caso es simple de entender, ¿no? Donald Trump quería que este fiscal federal, que es Eric Seibert, presentara acusaciones inexistentes contra Letitia James, que es la fiscal general de Nueva York. Literalmente quería que se invente cargos contra ella. Recordemos, Letitia James ha liderado investigaciones muy delicadas en contra de Trump. Y bueno, como el fiscal se negó a hacer esto, porque lógico, no existen pruebas de nada, la respuesta fue la típica, ¿no? O renuncias o te despido. Así es. Escuchemos esta noticia.
That is the judge in very legalese terms. I think in this ruling did a couple of things: dismiss this frivolous lawsuit yet again, but also in this ruling, I think Judge Mary Day, he reaffirms New York Times versus Sullivan. Yeah. He affirms that like we're just not going to play games with the free press. I'm wondering if you think this is, I understand this is in Supreme Court, so officially there's no precedent here, but do you think this is a signal to to other judges that they too need to stand up and reaffirm the law and the next suit, because this won't be the last one, you know?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is what Donald Trump does in court. I mean, remember when the Department of Justice sued judges in Maryland, and a judge that was appointed by Trump himself said this is totally unacceptable, a complete violation of the separation of powers, not political, nothing, complete violation. Then you have this court today saying we're not even letting this pass go. You know, you don't even have to respond. We're denying this, and you can refile and come back into the courtroom if you have good arguments, which of course the president doesn't. And so this is really indicative, by the way, of what we are seeing in the courts across the board. I know we're going to talk a lot about the First Amendment tonight because this has been quite a week with the president attacking the First Amendment. But what we have in a number of cases, he is losing before Republican judges, Democratic judges, judges he himself appointed, because what he's doing is just totally beyond the pale.
Can I just note, New York Times v. Sullivan is the law that created modern libel law, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just so we're all on the same page.
Yes. There's a continuum here happening, Sky. There's what is happening, his lawsuit against the New York Times, and there is what we have watched come from his FCC chair. You are among those, join the club, who have a lot of questions about exactly what it is that transpired. You have filed a FOIA request. That means you are asking to see calendars, emails. You want to know about the conversations that were happening behind the scenes. What are the questions that you have?
Well, we want to know, what is this administration doing to deny the American people the freedom of the press and to violate the First Amendment? Who is influencing this administration? I testified in Congress last year in a big panel where I was the only person at the dais that did not write a chapter of Project 2025, where the chair of the FCC was there. And before Congress and everyone, he said that he was committed to the First Amendment. But what we're seeing is that's not what is happening in this case. So we want the text messages, we want calendar invites, we want to understand who and what this commission has been meeting with, what has been going on, and we're going to get to it in this investigation.
You know, it's interesting in so many ways, Chrissy. When you listen to the president, the little man, crying foul about, oh, you know, they say such bad things about me. You know, we got to deal with this. Let's take a quick listen to the president now and then on free speech.
They give you only bad publicity for the press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents.
Well, that was clearly all a lie, because this idea of bringing free speech back to America when you cannot comment freely on the events of the day, whether you are in the media or outside the media. But the reality for Donald Trump is that he himself is a public figure. And under defamation law, the burden is on him to prove that the statements made about him were made with actual malice, quote, end quote, actual malice, meaning that there is intent to defame this man. False or reckless disregard for the truth. So when a newspaper, a television program, a sitcom, an editor is writing about events in which this man freely participates as president of the United States, comments on freely as president of the United States, and the country and the media respond to that, how is that defamation?
It isn't. And they can't prove that there's any. I mean, they allege that these reporters, that the New York Times has such intense hatred of the president. And again, the quote that that stuck out to me was that they were acting in a deranged way. I mean, they can't prove that in a court of law. I'd like to see them try. Again, the statements that were made were not false. They're certainly not knowingly false. I mean, you look at the sourcing for not only the book Lucky Loser, but you look at the sourcing for their articles. And it's just, these are meticulous examinations of 20 years of tax records. They're going through his business records. They're conducting interviews. You have Mike Schmidt with, audio interviews of former cabinet members. Like, they're not just off the cuff, stating opinions. Mm-hmm. These are based in fact. And so, a defamation claim will fail. But this administration and unfortunately his lawyers don't actually explain to him what the First Amendment means. You had his attorney general saying she was going to prosecute hate speech. You had his deputy attorney general say that heckling could be a racketeering crime, which, if that were true, the whole Philadelphia Eagles fan base would be in jail. I mean, this is not serious. They don't understand. Go look at their own DOJ website. It says that, the First Amendment protects free speech, and if there are beliefs that you find offensive, that is not enough to prosecute a case. Go check your own manual. And then you have the FCC chair, who I don't think most Americans want to know who Brendan Carr is. He should not be part of the conversation. And he's talking like mob muscle. We're going to do this the easy way or the hard way. What is this conversation? And you had a great post by Liz Cheney today where she was reminding Brendan Carr that, as a government official, you cannot attempt to coerce private parties to punish or suppress views that the government disfavors. That has been universally reaffirmed by the Supreme Court. So, again, I think you're going to have both sides of the aisle here really trying to school this administration on what free speech actually means.
We're talking about schooling this administration. We have breaking news on a story that we have been following all day, Simone, and that is that U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert, who oversees the federal prosecutor's office in the Eastern District of Virginia, as you will recall, he was tasked by the president with pursuing a case against New York AG Letitia James over supposed mortgage fraud, told colleagues late Friday that he plans to resign. That is after being told by the president he would be fired or he could resign, and that he expects his assistant, Maya Song, will be demoted from her supervisory role. All of this is according to a person familiar with Siebert's discussions. Simone, Siebert was a loyalist. I mean, we are now at the point where a Trump loyalist, someone he appointed to the post, refuses to do his bidding, and even those folks are being told, you can resign or you'll be fired.
Or you'll be fired. And, and shout out to our MSNBC colleague, Carol Leonnig, for this reporting, and Ken Delanian. I will add, their reporting also says that that Siebert was forced out and that employees in the office are distraught, with some in tears. This, to me, is, it's concerning. It's a word I've been using a lot lately, Sky. But this came from Bill Pulte. There is reporting out there from NBC News, MSNBC, from ABC News that underscored, I believe I saw something from the Washington Post that underscored that it was Bill Pulte that recommended to the president and to the Department of Justice that there's some there as it relates to AG Tish James. And then when the U.S. attorney said that they couldn't, in Virginia, said they couldn't find anything, it was Bill Pulte, according to reporting, that told the president, well, then you should fire this guy and get somebody in there that is going to do the bidding. I feel like, is there a lawsuit here? I don't know. There's obviously improper things happening, but are these things illegal?
Well, I think, yes. I mean, I think, look, the president's operating unlawfully across the board. That is why he has faced over 400 lawsuits and legal actions since he's been in office, and we're only at about 230 days, even if it feels like 200 years.
243, by the way.
243, you're counting. So, I mean, this is why you see all these suits being filed, and we'll have to see as this progresses. But look, this is hugely concerning because you have a president that comes in and makes a bunch of allegations. They get denied. Then he appoints his own people to look at them. And they say, consistent with my professional responsibilities as an attorney and as a prosecutor, there is nothing here. And he's not satisfied with that. And then he wants to just keep digging until he can persecute his political enemies. And so the question really is, I'm glad that Ted Cruz came out today to say that he supports the First Amendment. I mean, that's helpful to see, I guess. But where are the president's allies? Where are the Republicans in Congress?
Lo que acabamos de ver, amigos, es una muestra descarada de cómo Donald Trump está queriendo manipular la justicia, ¿no? Para protegerse, para atacar a quienes lo investigaban, como se los dije. Es una vendetta. Esto no es un simple conflicto político, es un atentado directo contra el Estado de Derecho. Solo quiero que piensen en esto. Si un presidente puede obligar a fiscales a inventarse delitos contra sus adversarios o ex adversarios, entonces, ¿qué diferencia hay entre una democracia y una dictadura? Aquí no estamos hablando de opiniones, hablamos de hechos. Este fiscal revisó las acusaciones y dijo, pero oye, aquí no hay nada. Y aún así Trump quería que se fabricara un caso. Sé que algunos podrían argumentarme que pero los presidentes siempre han presionado a fiscales, que siempre se ha visto este tipo de manipulación, ¿cierto? Y claro, señores, la política siempre tiene sus juegos de poder, eso es claro. Pero la diferencia aquí es brutal. Porque Trump no estaba buscando justicia, estaba buscando venganza. No existen pruebas, no había causa. Es un capricho personal contra Letitia James, solo porque ella lo ha expuesto como nadie. Además, hay un detalle clave, ¿no? Incluso funcionarios leales a Trump, gente nombrada por él mismo, se están negando a cumplir ese tipo de órdenes. Ya, eso nos dice mucho, ¿no? Si hasta tus propios aliados te dicen que esto es demasiado, ¿qué tan grave creen que era lo que estaba pidiendo? Lo que acaba de pasar con este fiscal, amigos, no es un simple episodio aislado. Para mí esto es una alerta roja. Donald Trump nos está demostrando que está dispuesto a destruir la independencia del sistema judicial con tal de cumplir sus caprichos. Pero bueno, ¿qué opinan ustedes? ¿Creen que este tipo de maniobras deberían de tener consecuencias legales más fuertes, ¿no? Para Trump? ¿O piensan que todo esto, pues, como mucho, ¿no? Quedará en el olvido, tanto como otros escándalos? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme en este video. Recuerden, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete a nuestro canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.